One of the things that doesn't really compute about the Shins to me is the fact that they have a very conflicting identity. I think it's interesting that they're now a band that exists with only one original member in it, and he basically carries the whole identity of the band. James Mercer is 46 years old, he's a father, and that obviously has influenced the way that his music has changed direction over the past 16 years since the release of their debut album. I hear a lot of their same spirit in this one. However, I've always found it interesting that Mercer is a reclusive artist. He shies away from the limelight, which I think isn't an attitude that reads in their music. I find the Shins have a very inviting sound. I think that often his high vocals, accompanied by their whimsical instrumentals, is an accessible and easy sound to consume. So I think it's almost confusing. It creates a bit of a dissonant appeal that Mercer is himself so different publicly from the music that he produces. Now, Heartworms is an adequate title for this album because it is definitely infectious, if you will forgive the bad joke. But I didn't see him reinventing that much of himself or his sound. I heard a lot of Broken Bell's influence on this one. It wasn't as introspective as some of his side projects and solo work tends to be. And I don't know, I guess I just can't get over the fact that he is basically writing this music for himself, yet still producing it under the moniker of the Shins. And I don't know why that bothers me, but I wonder why he decided to maintain that instead of release this as a solo effort. Because I don't hear a huge difference in between his different side projects. Do you know what I mean? I think Broken Bells does sound like the Shins. And I think Flake Music, which was his earliest band, and they're only available on like YouTube these days, I think it all kind of sounds like just different drafts of the same music, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because when he does produce strong songs, they are extremely strong. But I don't know, I guess I just don't really understand the impetus for the way he creates music and the way he releases music. Heartworms opened with its strongest song, Name for You, which is very clearly about Mercer's daughters. I felt that it was an underrated feminist anthem, and I love hearing artists talk about their personal lives, particularly because it provides a perspective as to how they've grown and changed. And let's be real, Mercer is a middle-aged man and the last man standing in this band. And that's very evident. He wrote every single one of the songs, and I do think that lyrically it was a more mature sound than we've heard on his previous albums. But yeah, I don't really know why this was a Shins release.
Yeah, so it's an interesting album. There seems to be an overriding ambivalence in a lot of the music that's coming out of the Shins. Again, it's nothing particularly bad, and I enjoyed it while I was listening to it, but I was definitely getting hit with a feeling of sort of what's the point? Outside of it being really, really nice, I can't really hear anything here that is important to listen to at this point, I guess. I feel like I've got a lot of time for the Shins, but at the same time, it felt so disposable, which is not something I'm used to thinking of when I listen to the Shins.
Yikes, yeah, that's a strong word.
I should clarify that. It's disposable in the sense that there wasn't really anything to keep me coming back, even though it retains this incredibly well-crafted and executed songwriting process and structure and sound and production. That's all there, but there's nothing there that I guess endears it beyond that immediate listen and any subsequent listens. It's all a very neutral appreciation for the music that's going on.
I mean, I can definitely agree with that. I think it's interesting because, when the band broke up and sort of became James Mercer's outfit, I read in interviews that he expressed a desire to meet new artists, and that's partially how Broken Bells with Danger Mouse was formed. And I guess it got me wondering why he didn't adapt a sort of musical collective feel in which he just plays with different artists every time. Like, what is it about maintaining the structure of a band that seems so important to Mercer? Obviously, neither of us can answer that question, but I guess, I wonder what kept him from just almost swinging with different musicians and always pushing himself to create something new versus enforcing the James Mercer / the Shins sound on new musicians?
That's a really valid question, and I think that it's to the detriment of Heartworms that it doesn't help shed any light on that. Let's face it, the people who are going to listen to a new Shins album are going to be people who are part of that fold and who are already interested in this sort of sound happening. I don't think that it's designed to win over any new fans or to bring the Shins back into more of a public focus. It's there to continue to exist inside of its own little world. So those are the sorts of questions that I would have really liked to see addressed or to give me some sort of insight into. And there's just none of it here. It's a very ambiguous album in terms of the band and also musically. And it comes back to that question of why? What makes this, a Shins album as opposed to anything else? Is this all just part of this larger collective and the frontman just doesn't want to identify himself and so he's hiding behind these different monikers for the same thing? But what's the point of that? What's the larger popular culture implication of that? There are all these things that I think are really interesting points, but I don't think the Shins are interested in. And then it just kind of comes back to that question of, well, what are they interested in? What are they trying to do here? And I don't have an answer. I don't really get a sense of addressing that question through this album.
No, but that being said, there were still some strong singles included on this. I thought Mildenhall, their sort of foray into folk country style music as done by the Shins, was particularly strong, even though maybe it was strong because it embraced this, I'm going to use the word cheesy trope of an awkward teenager discovering 80s albums and then picking up his dad's guitar. And I found that charming and honest, and I appreciated that. As I said earlier, Name for You is really a fantastic song. And also, I really liked Fantasy Island as well. So overall, it's a strong album. If I were to set it apart from everything I know about the Shins, I would like it. I still like it. But in tandem with everything I know about the Shins and James Mercer, I am still left wondering why.